Today on Locked On Canadiens, I have some delightful special guests to help me break down the Calgary game that's coming up tonight.
Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 737 of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day every day. My name is Laura Sab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm not joined, as usual, by my wonderful co-host Scott Matla. Instead, I have more wonderful people joining me today. Sorry, Scott, but the lovely Mike and Nathan from the ScorchStack are here. So if you listen to our podcast long enough, you'll have heard them both. You'll have loved them both, and I'm excited to have them join me today to kind of preview the Calgary game. I'll be honest, I wasn't keeping up with the Calgary Flames, so I'm going to ask a lot of questions. So first, Mike, how are you doing? And thank you for giving me your time today.
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. I'm always glad to help out and make your life a lot easier.
Thank you so much. And Nathan, you were on fairly recently, I guess maybe a year ago, so not that recent, but you were on with Ramp. How are you doing? Thank you for being back.
Great. It does not feel like a year. Time has no meaning, either pandemic or post-pandemic, however you want to view it. So you could have told me it was 5 years ago, and that sounds right. But I'm thrilled to be back.
Thank you so much for helping me out. Full disclosure, peek behind the curtain. I thought that tonight's game, like tonight was the Calgary game, not the preview for the Calgary game. So these lovely gentlemen helped me out in a pinch with Scott not here. And I have a lot of questions about the Calgary Flames because I'll be really honest, I've been so focused on the Habs night in and night out that I haven't had time to pay attention. But we know they had a pretty big off season. They obviously lost Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau. But then I feel like they pulled off a really good trade with the Florida Panthers. People thought Florida won that trade. I feel like it was fine, but how's it shaking out on the ice?
So Nathan and I and Scorchy Rams and everybody, we were at the Panthers game last night in Calgary, so we got to see kind of firsthand, I guess, or the difference between what the two teams look like currently. I know like Florida's got a lot of injuries, but and obviously we've seen a handful of games from MacKenzie, Weegar, and Jonathan Huberdeau, but it's kind of been hot and cold at times. I think the adjustment period for Huberdeau in particular hasn't gone as quickly as I think a lot of fans would have wanted. Then again, we also did learn recently that he started the season injured, so it's probably a huge contributing factor to what was an up and down start for him. And I think with MacKenzie Weegar in particular, he's been pretty fantastic, really low key, providing a lot of value in terms of defensive impacts, not so much offensively, but I've really enjoyed it. But I think that the one thing that the Flames really lack is that kind of crunch time impact forward, when they really need a goal. That's something that, Matthew Tkachuk was really, really vital in contributing to during his 6 or so seasons with the Flames. I think it was 6 seasons. So far it's been hot and cold. There are things that the team is obviously lacking, but I don't think it is solely on the fact that Matthew Tkachuk isn't there. I just think that there are a few components that he contributed nicely to that they should want right now.
Yeah, I think jumping off of what Mike said, Matthew Tkachuk in this league is a unicorn. He can do it all. So when you trade Matthew Tkachuk, even as good as the trade package was, you are trading away Matthew Tkachuk. So the absence, I think, is felt. And I think that after a summer where a lot of people were surprised at how the Calgary Flames really were the main character of summer, that it would just be an immediate jump into just being awesome. Like it was a game of EA, NHL 2022, and I can just plug and play players as I go and still use the same tricks and this and that. And that's not how it works, human being. So I think that learning about how Huberdeau has had to adjust, I think Huberdeau is learning also how to play under a coach like Daryl Sutter. MacKenzie Weegar is going to be a very good defender for the Flames for a long time, but he's not going to be a Cale Makar-esque kind of type of player. So expecting all these big things from these players, I think, was setting themselves up to fail. And really, this team needs time to gel and learn. I mean, half the roster really is different. So it's not. I think it's there was a lot of high expectations. I think we can still get there. It's just it wasn't going to happen immediately, and that's okay.
And so I meant to ask you because I feel like when I look to you and I look to your opinions, yes, I'm looking to be entertained, but I think you have your finger on the pulse a lot more. We have that same thing in our fan base as well, right? Some people who are way too pessimistic, some people who are way too optimistic. I think you guys just kind of like, you don't take it too seriously and you have fun with it all. Are you surprised by the way this is shaken out, or has this been what you thought it would be in the early going of the season?
I think I'm a little surprised, Laura. I don't think that I had it written in that a big 6-game losing streak after going 5-1 to start the season is kind of how I envisioned this going. I didn't think it was going to be, we were rolling like we're Boston and oh my gosh, we've lost 2 games. How could we ever do that? But to start the season so well at 5-1, and then really that Buffalo game is what really haunted us, where it was like, oh, we are fallible even to teams like Buffalo, and then it just kind of kept snowballing, which was a little bit disappointing. I do think that the Flames are a better team so far. I don't think, though, that they are world beaters necessarily just yet, but I think losing 6 in a row was a healthy reality check to say, all right, this team has places to go. I don't think Jacob Markstrom is playing at full health, and that's just me speculating. There's no official confirmation or even a rumor going around, but his wrist just doesn't look great to me. But I think that they would have been a little bit better, but I think not an all-star team, if that makes sense.
That absolutely makes sense. So one final question before we switch segments. Mike, I wonder, like, from your perspective, having that 6-game losing streak so early in the season, does that give them an opportunity to make enough changes? Because in Montreal, everybody wants the veterans traded and they want young players or prospects for the rebuild. And I don't think it works that way. The market right now is kind of a toilet. So what are your thoughts on, what changes they can make? Is it more internal? Is it strategic? Is it coaching? Is it just in general, just people need to just chill out and sort of put things back together?
I think it's a lot of things. I think if you look internally, I think Daryl Sutter could mix up his lines a little bit differently to play to player strengths, things that they do, and players that do things very well and exceed in doing it on a regular basis. For example, the combination of Dylan Dubé, Andrew Mangiapane, and new Calgary Flame Nazem Kadri, who we love. He's fantastic. But stylistically, putting Dylan Dubé, who clocks out at basically a third liner at best on the second line regularly, kind of pointless, especially when, he doesn't do a lot of things well consistently. I know he did score a shorthanded goal last night, but we didn't see it. We were walking to the Saddle Dome still. So I don't think that really counts, honestly. Like, that goal never happened as far as I'm concerned in history. I just don't think that it's the right blend on that particular line. And of course, Andrew Mangiapane has been hot and cold all season, and there's a lot of people expecting big things from him. So, maybe those are 2 line mates in particular that aren't a good fit for somebody like Nazem Kadri, who plays a very, north-south game, very agitative and aggressive in that. So maybe you play somebody else who plays north to south with him, for example, like a Jonathan Huberdeau or, a Tyler Toffoli or, somebody of that mix, just to try to get the right combination there. The other problem internally is that, unsurprisingly, there is nepotism in the NHL, and more specifically with the Calgary Flames when it comes to like their fourth line. And there are guys that consistently get ice time, even if it's under 10 minutes a night, and they do nothing. They're obviously better hockey players than me, which, I think most people are. But I know one thing, and one thing is that Milan Lucic is, utterly hopeless on the ice, and he's still getting regular playing time. You could inject some sort of skill, for example, a diminutive, wonderfully well-kept scoring phenom in the AHL like Matthew Phillips, call him up and see what he can do. If he's playing like
small goals boy. You've got a small
small
goals for you.
Yeah, except he'll fight people like twice his size in the AHL. He's not afraid of a challenge, and I think that's something that should be heralded to some degree as a quote unquote intangible that Daryl Sutter should love. But he's not going to want to play this guy. But I think if you were, for example, to give him a shot, call him up, maybe he plays really well, you bump him up the lineup and see what happens. There's options there. And then of course, like if you look at the league, like you said, it's kind of a toilet. Every team is capped out. The only way you're moving salary out to make sweeping changes are very I guess maybe aggressive changes at this point, requires moving assets to dump salary, right? Like we saw it with Sean Monahan going to Montreal. You had to pay a first to get rid of that guy because he had 2 bum hips and he was coming off another surgery, and they needed money to sign Nazem Kadri. So it's like, you're only limited with, basically internal options, or God forbid, something miraculous happens and money starts moving around in the league and you can make some changes. But it's got to start in the locker room, I think, with some really minor things like lines, and then go from there.
I agree with you. And we have lost Nathan. He is trying to get back into the room. So we're going to let him back in whenever we can. But in the meantime, we're going to switch around. I do want to ask some questions about Sean Monahan, actually. And that's coming up in just one moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, analysis, everything you could possibly want, including sports podcasts. I know you love them because you're listening to us right now. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and even esports. We've got it all at betonline.net. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix, and so you can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. And while we wait for Nathan to come back, I'm going to start asking Mike about Sean Monahan. Here's the thing about Sean Monahan, right? He needed a fresh start in Montreal because he's had sort of an injury-plagued, I want to say, career. It's the last few seasons, but as long as I can remember Sean Monahan, it's been a lot of injuries, some bad luck on that front. But in Montreal, so far, so good. I'm knocking on wood because I don't want to jinx our lovely and handsome addition from Calgary. We thought that this was just a situation where the Canadiens were trying to acquire a first pick, and then anything that happens with Sean Monahan, whatever it is, was not really relevant. But he's really gelled into this lineup, and he has been producing. And I think that surprised me. That's honestly surprised me. I thought even if he's back in the lineup, first of all, we didn't even think that he was going to be ready to start the season. But to contribute, to find chemistry with people like Huberdeau or Christian Dvorak or Evgeny Dodonov, I'm pleasantly surprised by Sean Monahan. So I'm wondering about your experience of him. So let's put all the injuries aside. How good of a player, had he reached his full potential, would he have been in Calgary?
I think the one comparison I made years ago privately with a group of people, Nathan might have been in a chat, was like Phil Kessel if he played center. So very offensively minded, but like a complete void zone in terms of defensive awareness in the defensive zone. That was never his strong suit. I know a lot of people might try to cite his draft profile in the draft year coming out of the OHL with Ottawa, but nobody cares about that. Nobody cares how great of a defense you play in the OHL in your draft year, because the only thing that gets you to the NHL most of the time is, how many goals and points you put up. And that's what he was gifted with, an exceptional shot and ability to finish well above the league average. And he rode that for quite a while. It helped that he had a small goal scoring phenom on his wing to help feed him for the bulk of that. But I think that the biggest hindrance for him isn't so much in the defensive zone. I think it's the fact that he just isn't able to finish at an above average rate now. That started to drop off even when he was healthy to some degree. I mean, maybe you could argue to some degree that, the underlying impact of health and injuries that we were or were not aware of contributed to that. But at the end of the day, he kind of eroded to just being empty calorie points, on the power play, being useful in kind of net front or in the bumper role to set up plays there. Which, obviously sucks. You never want to see a player like his stature, come through the system and develop and eventually erode that quickly. But that's kind of what he clocked out as. Now, the league still has a need for players like that who can just dine out on the power play and, contribute. But, foot speed and mobility started to catch up with them. And it was, even if you took the injuries out of the kind of equation there, he wasn't the most mobile of guys either, a fleet of foot. So, offensively minded, devoid of any defensive value, empty calorie guy, but great smile, great hair.
We do love him. And that's the interesting thing, is that, the Montreal Canadiens as a whole are kind of a defensive black hole. So I feel like he must feel just at home here. We are struggling a little bit, like even the top line with Nick Suzuki and Kirby Dach, right? Like two of the two-way players that we have that are generally good defensively, because they take so many tough minutes and they're playing on the top line with Cole Caulfield. It's going really well offensively, but every time I see them in the defensive zone, I know I'm looking at like 2 minutes stuck in the defensive zone. So that, that's been an interesting comparison, because I feel like the Canadiens kind of have a lot of guys like that, where it's like Their contracts are coming up. They are veterans. They do have some value, but not all the value. So everybody's patiently waiting for him to be traded. And to his credit, like Sean Monahan's doing everything he possibly can in Montreal to increase his value. Like literally, we thought this was going to be a who cares, not noticeable, just whatever it is, like take the first pick, the first rounder, all of that. It's going much better than I expected. So I'm going to turn it back around to Calgary because I have a lot of other questions. Let's talk
If I may,
really
very quickly.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
One thing I do want to add about Sean Monahan, I apologize for dipping out. Brad Treliving heard me talking about Jacob Markstrom and cut my Wi-Fi. But I will say that with Sean Monahan, I believe I read this a couple of years ago, that where one of Sean Monahan's greatest skills was that most of his shots hit the net. I think it was something about 70 or 80% of them. He was able to find that time, whatever it was, to make sure that it hit the net. It wasn't necessarily going in the net, but he didn't have a lot of block shots. He didn't have a lot of shots that went wide. A lot of his shots that he took followed through and really hit that net. And I think that's something that's been hampered by injuries. And so it's just one of those, it's the little things in the game where if Monahan is able to find that space and have someone who's finding that space for him at the time, he's able to get it on net. And so we saw the effectiveness down when the injuries kind of hampered there. But that skill, that IQ to say, this shot needs to hit the net is still there for him. So I think in a space right now where Marty St. Louis has told him, go out there and have fun, he's not so much worried about everything else that's going on. He's just using his primal thoughts, I will say. He is gifted with a brain that can focus intensely on hockey or whatever task is in front of him. And so when he's just out there having fun, he's remembering everything else that wasn't injury hampered. That's letting him still be an effective player for Montreal.
And so that's another thing, right? Like Montreal's big on hockey IQ people. Like they're all their forwards, everybody they draft, pick, or trade for with the intention of keeping high hockey IQ guys. I think Martin St. Louis just really loves that, and he does tend to find like whatever it is that they still have in them and bring it out, right? Like whether you have one skill or whether you have many skills, he's really good at doing that. So, it's interesting because he hasn't been coaching for all that long, right? Like if you take all of his months of NHL experience, it's like 5 or 6 at this point. It's not a whole lot, but he's made an impact, and he's also at the same time making those mistakes and learning from them. One of the mistakes, obviously, is the fact that the Canadiens' power play is abysmal and hopeless. And at some point, the refs stop calling penalties on the opponents, even though they deserve them, because they don't want to see any more of the Canadiens' power play at all. But I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about tonight's game and how to kind of, what to expect from Calgary. And that's all coming up in just one moment. All right. Let's break it down. Calgary, goaltending, offense, defense, special teams. How are they doing this year? I'm going to ask Nathan first because you were out for a while.
Yeah, great. I will start with goaltending, and I'm sure Mike's going to have opinions, so I will throw it back to him as well. Calgary's goaltending, I was hinting at this before I disappeared briefly, but I don't think that Jacob Markstrom is playing at top speed. I think there's a lot going on. If I had to speculate, he is someone who just recently learned he's going to be a parent. He's got a lot of stuff going on off the ice. Not to say that it's troubling or distracting, but Jacob Markstrom is a human being right now. He came off a tough loss to the Edmonton Oilers in the second round of the playoffs. And I don't think he looks healthy. I don't think he is, done as a goalie in this league. I think that's ridiculous. But right now, he is not doing well. Dan Vladar, on the other hand, looks good. His record is abysmal, but it's not necessarily his fault. He's looked very good in games where he just hasn't gotten that goal support. So I'm kind of hoping to see Daryl Sutter maybe just give him a little bit of a run. I don't think this is necessarily a goaltending controversy. I think this is really just a chance to hit reset and Sutter can play his Sutter games that he loves to play. But right now, it's not so much about finding the combination that's going to work in the playoffs. It's about making sure this team actually gets a little bit more confidence in themselves. And I think that Dan Vladar is the answer for this stretch of games this week.
Mike?
Yes. Everything that Nathan said about Dan Vladar is true, given that we just watched him play fantastic hockey. And he also played really great the other night against Pittsburgh. And despite the fact that people might have argued that Jacob Markstrom should have started, but they didn't look at the stats, and the stats don't lie. He was phenomenal. I think the only thing that kind of stands out with Jacob Markstrom right now that kind of bothers me is that, and it's maybe endemic to the Flames franchise, because we just learned recently that Jonathan Huberdeau started this season injured, is that a lot of players in the Flames organization, if they are dealing with something health related, they keep playing until the wheels fall off or their performance tanks, and then it comes out it's like, oh yeah, started the season and I was banged up, and everybody's like, oh, this makes perfect sense. So I think the more that Nathan talks about him potentially being hurt, the more it makes sense to me, just given what we know from a pretty large sample size of what Jacob Markstrom looks like on his peak and when he looks average and when he looks like right now, which is he's like a 2 flusher in the toilet. Kind of, specific to like special teams in the power play and penalty kill. Power play it looks about as good as Jacob Markstrom right now when he's in the net, which is to say I would want to turn down every penalty that comes our way because it's probably no different than the Habs situation. They're just not clicking. I think one thing that they've struggled to recreate is Johnny Gaudreau's ability to enter the zone and set up. They're relying on Nazem Kadri to be that guy, especially on like a drop entry, when they're trying to break into the zone after maybe they get kicked out of the offensive zone, they have to break back in. But they're just not setting up well. There's a lot of hesitation and indecision, especially when it comes to Huberdeau floating in the formation and trying to set people up or trying to break in. And then they're also just relying on a lot of point shots as well at times to, kind of get things moving as opposed to getting forwards active and engaged in the play. The second power play unit is scraps. It's a Milan Lucic out there with Adam Ruzicka and Michael Backlund, and hoping to whatever God they worship that maybe they can get something on the net, and occasionally it happens, but it's not consistent. And the penalty kill is a little bit better. I really like what they're doing this year. It's a little less aggressive in their in-zone attack. They're not pressing as much, but they are creating opportunities, which I find really fascinating. Like they're playing a very passive pressure game, really active again on dealing with the offensive zone, break in from the attacking team. I really like the use of defensemen and forwards kind of pressing on puck carriers when they're doing their forecheck. I think it's worked out really nicely. The only thing I'd like to see a little bit more in the penalty kill is a little bit more high aggressive, aggro penalty killing, like very aggressive press, trying to, get the puck out of the zone a lot quicker and actually clear the zone. They're doing a lot of kind of backhanded or like off the boards clears, just get it down the ice. You're going to eat more time rather than, a board battle and all of a sudden you turn the puck over and it's in the back of the net. So minor things, but I have a lot of confidence that Ryan Huska can kind of get them back to where they were playing previously, in really good stretches.
So I just remembered how much I love listening to Mike Fail talk about a penalty kill. Like that, this was like a treat listening to this. But I just need to roll this back a second. Did you say Milan Lucic was on a power play unit?
Yeah, he's I just assume that they can't get him off the ice due to his, lack of fleet of feet. He is out there doing things, I think. I can only imagine that, he's like when you would go to like a grocery store and you see like a bunch of teens working and you could usually pick out which ones were just kind of like there eating time, just getting paid on the clock because they had nothing better to do. Like they're not putting anything on shelves. They're not helping anybody. They're not going out to get carts that are just left in the parking lot strewn about, somebody could hit one or, God forbid somebody needs one to put their groceries in. Like he just stands there. He loiters around. There's like a listlessness of him that, he's searching for some sort of meaning in his life after reading Nietzsche for like the first time in his life. And he's discovered existential crisis. Like he's a futile player who can't do anything right in my eyes. And by saying that, he's going to score versus the Habs now. And I'm going to never hear the end of it.
The problem also is that with Lucic on the power play, if you're going to insist on having Lucic on the power play, I get it. He's a big man. Use that. That's it. That's his strength. Is physically he cannot be shrunk. But instead, they have him on the second power play with Michael Stone blasting shots. And it's like, great, we're going to shoot from as far out as possible and hope that this massive Hulk doesn't actually block the shot, but screens the goalie. And instead we're just inching closer to a game of will Michael Stone inadvertently manslaughter on the ice by just ripping shots at him? Because if you're gonna have Lucic block the net, it would make a lot more sense to have that east-west passing, have that goalie, where's the puck? I don't know. But if we just keep on, like Mike was saying, try and just blast it from the point, Milan Lucic is doing the defending team a favor by just being a big guy that's just there, as opposed to any value whatsoever. I'm not advocating for Milan Lucic to be on the power play, but if you insist upon it like he is anchored to that ice, at least use him effectively.
Are you advocating for a puck to hit him and take him off the ice for an indefinite period of time? Not that it harms his livelihood or long-term health, but just removes him from play for, let's say, 82 games with the Calgary Flames, or how many, like 60 games? I don't know. The point, like how many it takes in the regular season plus a playoff run to get the cup. Like he just is hit with a puck, never comes back. It's just great that he's in the press box, he's loving life, he just doesn't come back on the ice. Is that what you're advocating
We reviewed
for?
the words that you said out loud on YouTube, and most people don't speak like that on YouTube. So we're giving you a quick suspension to think about what you've said. Advocating harm upon others, never our motto here.
But you didn't answer the question, Nathan. Are you advocating for this or not?
Oh, I think that if it's not a healthy scratch, then whatever the fates may decide with Milan Lucic, I'm in favor of it.
The fates are going to decide that he's going to score 2 against the Habs just to spite Mike. All
Yeah,
right.
and then he'll be the one with 3 scores all year long. It'll be great.
So let's talk about the offense. We talked a little bit about it in the first segment when we talked about the changes. Where is it coming from? What's their, I guess, what is the thing that the Canadiens defense should worry about other than the fact that they're the Canadiens defense?
Nothing. They should not worry about. Actually, no. They scored 6 on Florida. What should they, Nathan? What should they worry about?
They should worry about Brett Ritchie, absolute threat to score from the worst possible angles of the ice. I think the weirdest goal that we saw against Florida was Brett Ritchie missed his initial shot, was awkwardly skating, and threw a puck on net that was apparently so hard. We watched it physically blast Sergei Bobrovsky back into his neck, and the puck just kind of sat trickling there over the blue line. Brett Ritchie finds a way to be completely a non-factor throughout the entire time, and then takes one bizarre goal line angle shot that miraculously goes in, and that's how he's been a Flame for 4 years in a row. Realistically, I know that Nazem Kadri has cooled off since he started, but he still looks great in transition. I think that
he loves playing against the Habs.
He loves playing against the Habs. Why wouldn't he? I think that there is right now a lot of that cycling going on trying to find that chemistry. Mike, I think, will want to talk about Tyler Toffoli, so I'll let Mike talk about him because he really waxed poetic about him great in the big Mike Day thing this week. But I think that right now the threat is that guys are kind of finding their groove. I talked a little bit about gelling. I think that last game was Mangiapane's best game. I think that there's a lot more expectation, a lot more pressure. It's not just, oh, haha, this guy could play for Team Canada. It's, oh, this guy is legit. He's starting to get paid like he is expected to score 30 goals. He hasn't really been scoring as much as he has, but he's doing all the little things right. Like you see him engaged. He's in battles. I think that Andrew Mangiapane is set to kind of go on a heater a little bit. And normally this is a group of guys that has the talent. I think if you sleep on them, right now, Calgary's really been sleeping on themselves. So I think there's only so much before someone has to say enough is enough and kick it into high gear.
And I'm actually really looking forward to this game, to be honest. I know the Canadiens their record has been surprising in that they're not completely in the toilet, but, things are working out in their favor. And depending on who the goaltender is, right? Like they were both playing lights out. But Jake Allen has come a little bit back down to earth, but Samuel Montembeault is still putting up some insane numbers, particularly for a guy nobody expected anything from. Like, Florida put him on waivers and the Canadiens picked him up. And so, I think that's going to be interesting. But the fun thing about the Canadiens is that you don't know what you're going to get on any given night, because while they're working on individual players getting better, there's a whole lot that doesn't really make sense. And Martin Saint-Louis does shake up lines and pairings and all of that. But Juraj Slafkovsky is not playing very many minutes. They had him on the fourth line. They don't really know where to put him. They know what they want him to end up as, but they're taking their sweet time with him. So, we don't really know. And then you've got players like Mike Hoffman, for example, who when they're in the lineup is like, what is that guy, right? Like, what is he? And then, you've got your Kirby Doc, finding really, really strong success on the wing with Nick Suzuki. So, it's very much, you don't really know what you're going to get, but that at the very least that something surprising is going to happen. And usually Cole Caulfield is going to score a goal. That's how it's worked this season so far. So I'm excited because I think, I've always enjoyed watching the Habs play Calgary. When I say always, that's not always, the last couple of years, they turn out to be really fun games. The Flames are a fun team to watch despite, their inconsistency this season. And best of all, I get to talk to you guys because the ScorchStack crew is my favorite crew. Locked On Canadiens will always love ScorchStack. We will always be best friends forever. Subscribe to ScorchStack. So real quick, I want to thank you guys for joining me, particularly, at the last minute and kind of helping me out because I'm an idiot. So tell people where they can find your work and what you're all about.
Oh, do I get to do the sales pitch? Oh, this is great. Okay.
Do it.
The year is 2020. I think it's 2020. Yeah, the year is 2020. The six of us at the ScorchStack are thrown to the wind. We don't know what to do with our lives. The world is in chaos. And suddenly, through the echoes of time, Scorch appears to us. All of us consecutively. Once at, one evening, we're all having 6 separate dreams. He appears in our dreams. Well, this is ScorchStack. Since then, we have launched the #1 Calgary Flames newsletter in the entire internet. That is factual in every ounce of the sentence. You cannot dispute it. We are a lifestyle brand. We are going to have water bottles. We're going to be on Twitch, YouTube, Friendster, Napster, Nexopia. Do you guys remember Nexopia? I would say #1 social media network in Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, that general proximity. Maybe not so much back east, but we're #1 there too. We are everywhere. You can find us on Parler, Telegram, CNN, everywhere. It doesn't matter. Every social media network that is coming out of the woodwork right now as a replacement for Twitter, we have an account on it. We are providing content to the masses for free. Although if you want to give us money, we will take donations. We are not going to solicit getting money on such a wonderful network as Locked On Canadiens. We would never do that to you. We will take betting money though. So if you are a betting company who wants to give us money to promote betting, a thing that all 6 of us love to do, we will do it.
Oh yeah.
Make sure that you follow us on Twitter at the ScorchStack. Smash that subscribe button. Read the newsletter. Tell your family about it at Christmas. Let them know that you didn't get them a gift because you got them a free subscription to ScorchStack. They will love you forever. They will pay for your college. They will buy you a house. They will pay for your wedding. If you don't want to get married, marry somebody anyways and just take the money and run with it and say that ScorchStack had you a bunch of money for a wedding you're never going to attend. It's phenomenal. We changed lives.
You do. You didn't even mention how many trades you've broken since you've existed.
Oh, I don't want to flex too hard
That's old
here.
news.
Yeah.
That's why Mike is our VP of content and also lifestyle improvement. We each specialize in a different area, and Mike couldn't have said any better than I would, so I just won't. I'll defer to Mike on that one.
And you can find my lovely, wonderful guests on Twitter at the ScorchStack as well. Nathan, can you spell your Twitter handle? It's HANOTEN.
Yes, that is exactly correct.
And then Mike Fail is Mike, and then in capital letters, all caps, FAIL. You have to put the all caps in order to find him. You are so delightful. I'm so grateful to you for giving me your time today. And in the meantime, if you want to subscribe to this podcast, you can find it anywhere you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at LO_Canadiens. You can also find me specifically on Twitter at The Active Stick. My co-host Scott Matla, who will be back next week, can be found at Scott Matla. Don't forget your mailbag questions. Email them to me at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. I will be back tomorrow with a Flames recap and the mailbag.